Hello everyone, Bill here from Humanlytics. Today we're going to talk about attribution modeling, probably one of the most important topic in digital marketing and probably one of also the least understood topic. I've been having a lot of conversations with people within the industry recently, and I realized that there are a lot of intricacies and details about attribution modeling that is under-recognized and undercovered by a lot of the guides out there. So this guide is my attempt to make up that gap and also show you some of the most popular attribution models that you will see on your daily work and how they are relevant to you and why you should care about them. So let's begin by talking about what is an attribution model. In the old marketing world, or if we say 5 to 10 years ago, most of the orders that were placed on your website are a result of one visit, a result of one ad, because the mind of the customer is pure and they see something, they buy immediately. But right now, increasingly so, when an order or conversion happens on your website, it is a result of multiple visits spanning usually a couple of days. So it does no longer make sense to only give the very last traffic source your customer converted on the full credit. We also need to consider all previous visits by that customer which resulted in the ultimate conversion. Therefore, the way we say it is all channels related to a customer's conversion need to be attributed some credit in some way. And the way we attribute it is called attribution modeling. So there's one intricacy here you need to think about when thinking about an attribution model. Most of the attribution model you see out there are something that I call an invalid attribution model. What does this mean? For example, if a customer places an order on your website and Google takes the full credit for the order. At the same time, Facebook came out. Facebook's like, okay, I have taken place in this order as well. So Facebook also takes the full credit. And when you combine all of your data together to conduct a multi-platform analysis, you end up having two orders instead of one as it originally was, and the orders are double counted. So that specific attribution model is considered invalid. So in a valid attribution model, the sum of all attributed orders across all different platforms should equal to the total number of your orders during that time period. And in a single attribution case, so if we just think about one order, every channel should take some credit, but the sum of all of these channels' credit should add up to 1. So Facebook might take 0.4, Google might take 0.5, Direct might take 0.1, and they all add up to 1. And when that happens, we consider that a valid attribution model. Another key element of attribution model is an attribution window. You see this a lot when you're configuring Google Ads. Facebook, by default, has a 30-day attribution window. This is how far back we want to consider the activity of your users to be related to the conversion. For example, if your attribution window is 30 days, a user visited your site 31 days ago and converted 31 days later, that initial visit is not considered as part of your attribution model because it's too far back. But if the user visited in the 20 days before your conversion, we consider that and we attempt to give some credit for that specific visit. Generally, most platforms use 30-day attribution window. I think that's pretty good. But one of the caveats you need to consider is that if within that 30 days, the same user placed two orders, some of your channels might be considered twice when you're computing attribution channel for either of these orders. And that specific visit might be slightly inflated in terms of the credit given. You can't do anything about it. There's no standard way of removing that at the moment, but just be aware that this might happen and just keep that on the back of your head. The law of fading accuracy. The further back your attribution window is, the more likely you're going to miss one or two visits on the way. Something is going to be misattributed or unattributed, simply due to cookie mistakes, a variety of other issues. However, the longer your attribution window is, the more holistic your entire analysis is. You can have a holistic view of how your customer is interacting with your brand before converting. So a longer window means it's less accurate but more holistic, and a shorter attribution window means it will have a lot better accuracy in terms of attribution model, but it will be less holistic. It will cover less of the customer journey. Once again, 30 days is a good benchmark, and you should just always use 30 days unless you are in an industry that converts much more rapidly than the 30-day conversion window will allow. Now let's consider an example. On day one, this specific user saw your ad on Google, then saw your ads on Facebook. Then on day two, they thought about your company again, and they visited you through organic search. And then later in the day, they saw your second ad on Google. And finally, on day three, they converted through direct channel. Based on this journey, there are a couple of questions that need to be asked. First of all, it obviously doesn't make sense to attribute all the credit to that direct conversion happened on day three. But how do we assign credit to every single touch point of this conversion funnel? And then in case of there are multiple orders and we're computing CPA for the company, trying to figure out how much return each of the ad give, how do we compute the CPAs specifically? Before going to more computations or playing with numbers, we need to first talk about the attribution perspective of our attribution models. What I mean by attribution perspective is to which event we want to anchor our attribution window, when the attribution window starts. There are two popular options. One is based on the delivery of the ad, which means that we start the attribution window when the ad was delivered. Or we can anchor our attribution window based on the occurrence of the conversion, which usually doesn't happen on the same day of the ad delivery. When we're anchoring based on the delivery of the ad, we usually look into the future. And when we are anchoring based on the occurrence of conversion, we usually look into the past. I'll explain more in the next slide. So let's start with the conversion perspective, which anchor based on the occurrence of the conversion and look into the past. So whenever conversion occurs, we consider that day one. And if the conversion window in this example is 30 days, we look back at all traffic sources that resulted in the occurrence of this conversion and attribute credit to everything that happened within that conversion window. And in the extreme case that we showed here, all conversion credits will be assigned on day three to all the channels because that's the time that conversion happened. On the other hand, when we're dealing with the ad perspective, we anchor our attribution model on a specific ad. For example, here we're anchoring on the first Google ad. Instead of looking back, we look forward into 30 days in the future. And as long as a conversion that happened within the 30-day window is related to the delivery of the specific ad, we assign this credit back into the ad on day one. Let's look at an example here using our extreme case. As you see here, even though that the conversion happened on day three, because no ads was delivered on day three, all the credit for that specific conversion was attributed back to ads that happened on day one and day two. So if you are at day three, your numbers on day one, day two is not golden. By that I mean, it's still subject to change as long as it is within the 30-day attribution window for each of the ad we see here. So now let's do a more detailed conceptual comparison between the two methods, the ad perspective versus the conversion perspective. So the ad perspective focuses on answering the question, how many conversion each of my ad has resulted in. It usually does not consider cross-channel factors because it's very laser focused on a specific ad. It is very good for optimizing delivery within a specific channel, but it's really bad at optimizing across different channels. And because it focuses on each individual ads from different platforms, and each individual ads are trying to take as much credit as possible, your CPA is usually inflated. By that I mean your CPA will be lower than what it usually is. And it's in general easier to compute because this number you probably can have them readily available in your advertising platforms like Google or Facebook. On the other hand, the conversion perspective attribution is a little bit more complex. It focuses on answering the question, how many different traffic sources has resulted in the conversion? And it considers all channels that have resulted in the conversion for this ad and attempt to allocate credit fairly on the day of conversion. In general, it's good for optimizing delivery and budget across different channels. And it can also help you compute the real CPA for each of your channel that have resulted in the conversion. More on that later. In terms of computational CPA, we'll go into that in the next slide. It is typically more complex to compute. So now let's look at CPA computation specifically for the ad perspective and the conversion perspective. In ad perspective, once again, because conversions are attributed back to the day of ad delivery, as long as you're computing the CPA for an ad or platform on a specific day, as long as within the attribution window, that number you have, the CPA number, is subject to change. It will go lower and lower all the way until the 30-day window. Then will stay golden. It won't change anymore. It is the most common way of computing your CPA at the moment, but most people probably are not aware that your CPA will change in this method of computation. It is easy to compute. The formula is simply spending on the day divided by the order attributed to ads that were delivered on the day. Now let's talk about the conversion perspective attribution. Sometimes we compute this through platforms like Google Analytics, which gives us a fairly good way of figuring out the conversion perspective attribution. So conversions are not attributed back to the ad. However, they are counted on the day of conversion. So even though the ad might be delivered 4 or 5 days ago, we attribute credit of that conversion to that platform on the day. CPA is golden. It means that it won't change. It won't have the same issue we have with ad perspective attribution because we don't look into the future. However, most people get this computation wrong. I wouldn't say you get it wrong. I would say they're using the naive way of attributing. The naive way of computing is you just simply divide by spending of the day with the conversion of the day. But the problem with that is you're not spending on the ad that have resulted in the conversion on the day. So the real way of computing it is you actually need to go back to your advertising data and look at the spending you spend on the ad that have resulted in the conversion that happened today. And then pull that cost to today to compute the real CPA for your conversions. We'll talk more about that later. Right now, quite honestly, besides us, there's not really a good model in the market that can help you figure that out. Now let's talk about view-through conversion versus click-through conversion. View-through conversion has become increasingly popular in recent years because the technology has become available for platforms to compute view-through conversions. What view-through conversion means is that if a user has saw your ad, but they perform no action or interaction, which is considered a click, and then they converted on your website later and made a purchase, that specific interaction, the view itself, is considered an element in your attribution model. And the ad will take credit for that conversion, despite the fact that no interaction happened with the ad specifically. Sometimes there might be a criteria like 2 or 3 seconds staying on the page, so to prevent cases where you just start scrolling through and didn't even notice your specific ad. But overall, view through convergence is a very black box description. We don't really know what a view is defined is, and there's a lot of uncertainty around that. Then we have the traditional click-through conversion, which is a click on your ad. In some platforms, it is click on anywhere on your ad, and in some platform, it is a click on your link. So user has to perform that click action for the conversion to be considered a valid conversion. For me personally, view through conversion is a very good metric to know, but it's not a metric that is rigorous enough to be considered into our attribution model due to the fact that we don't really know what happened during that view. And there's no way to combine data from multiple platforms and stitch together a customer journey of a customer. For example, he viewed your Facebook ad first, and they view your Google ad, then they click on your Google ad, then they viewed another Facebook ad, they converted. That entire journey stitching is way too complicated to do, and we don't have enough data to do that. So for attribution modeling, I will strictly not consider view through conversion. So now let's talk about direct, which is probably a pain for a lot of analysts. A little bit of background on direct. A significant portion of your conversions are going to come from the direct conversion source, which is simply in Google Analytics classified as direct. In many cases, direct may be the only traffic source that those users convert through. And it's completely useless because it gives you no additional information beyond the fact that the website is visited. Sometimes it's not because people type into your URL directly. Sometimes because UTM parent was lost and it was recognized as a direct visit, even though it is not. And it's just overall, the way I would describe it is a trash can of all traffic sources. So how do we deal with this situation? The first step is to make sure this direct loss happen as little as possible. So be rigorous in marking all your UTM links. And beyond that, I would just recommend ignoring direct entirely and consider a gift from God, because you can really not tell anything about direct traffic. And there's no other places in this world that you can find out after the data has been collected where this direct traffic is coming from specifically. However, the caveat of that is you can use some advanced correlation algorithm to compare associations between your ad spend and conversion reported by the platform with an increase and change in your direct traffic. But overall, that's just very complex, it's very muddy, and you can at best get a very best estimation of how much credit you should assign direct traffic to each of the platforms. I would not recommend it. Now let's talk about attribution modeling in popular advertising platforms, starting with Google Ads, because they are, despite the fact that I still have a problem with their attribution model has been one of the best in the industry. However, everything they do is still on ad perspective, because remember, one key thing I want everyone to remember here is that all of the advertising platforms are trying to be as greedy as possible and take as much credit as possible for their own platform. And they don't want to give credit to any other platforms. So in Google Ads, all attribution models are computed on an ad perspective, on an account specific level. What I mean is that when they're computing their attribution model, they do not consider any other sources other than ads that would deliver on one account. What this means is that if you have 2 Google accounts, your conversion number on your ad account simply cannot be consolidated because they will overlap with each other and they will take multiple credits. It is valid and helpful for optimizing your Google Ads using the Google Ads optimization algorithm and for reporting. But if you're doing anything cross-channel or cross-account, their numbers simply cannot be trust reporting. So what are you using it for? The crucial part of Google Ads conversion model is that it is used for smart bidding and sometimes optimizing your ad delivery. So you want to use a model as sophisticated as possible compared with. So you want to use a model that's as sophisticated as possible when you are setting your conversion goals. And with that, data-driven is the way to go. And honestly, it should, unless you have a very good reason to use anything else, it should be your only active attribution model. However, you are encouraged to set up other attribution models on Google Ads, but just turn them off. By turn them off, I mean do not include them in the optimization for the conversion. And there's an option to do that. It helps you compare the result of different models, and it will help you understand your interaction with your consumers a lot. Another note to put on this here is campaign level optimization is coming in Google Ads. You can click on the link in the presentation to figure out. And right now it's only available for search ads, but it's going into display and video very soon. So now let's talk about other channels. I group them in all together just because that's basically how it works for all other advertising channels. Once again, everything's still on ad perspective. All attributions are account and platform specific. It means that if you have multiple accounts or multiple platforms, they all attribute within themselves independently. Same idea as having multiple Google Ads accounts. And the most popular method they use, even though they don't explicitly state it, is platform-specific last click. We'll touch more on this later, but overall, the very last ad that resulted in a conversion takes all the credit. One common thing I see people do is they add up their conversion on Facebook, they add up conversion on Google Ads, and they add up their conversion on Bing. Never do that. It's just wrong, simply because the method of computation of that conversion. So what do? First of all, I will not rely on advertising platforms for your reporting because they use the ad perspective. Instead, you should invest in a solution or use Google Analytics, which uses in a conversion perspective. If you're only accounted for one platform, if you are, for example, platform manager for Facebook or for Google Ads or for Bing for your company, just rely on in-platform reporting is fine. But you just need to know what the data really means. It doesn't really mean how many conversions that happen on the day. If you're managing and optimizing across different platforms, never use in-platform reporting for attribution to compare the effectiveness of different channels. It will never add up, and the conceptual background of your approach, if you're using different platforms, is just simply inconsistent with your ultimate goal of computation. So now let's go into more detail and talk about different attribution models. We're going to start with a more greedy model, which is platform-specific last touch attribution, which, as you just heard, what most platform uses. And then we'll go gradually into a more accurate model. By greedy, I mean here is every platform, especially the advertising platforms, try to take as much credit as possible for the conversion. And they usually ignore organic sources just because they don't want to associate conversion to something that users do not spend any money on. So last platform touch attribution model. This is very long. I'm trying to consolidate these terminologies, but overall, the key elements, first is last touch, which means that the very last ads gets credit. And then second, it's a platform specific model, which means that every platform will take one credit. So if you have 3 platforms, you'll get 3 conversions in your overall reporting, even if it's just one conversion. And because of that, it's not a valid model. So consider, going back to our extreme case that we showed you earlier in the presentation. As you see here, that conversion happened on day 3, but because ads was delivered on day 2 and day 1, the first Facebook ad claimed 1 credit because that's the only ad that happened on Facebook, and Google Ad 2 takes 1 credit because it is the very last ad that was delivered through the Google platform. And as you see here, that Facebook and Google will call this the last click platform or the last click model, and it's actually not a last click model, as I will show you later. It is a platform last click model. All right, so now let's talk about a multi-order case and illustrate how we are computing CPA based on different perspectives. If you hear me in different voices, because I didn't make this video in one sitting. I made this in like 2 or 3 sittings, and this is like a break point because I realized we made a mistake that it's not infinity, it's undefined. So everything you see is undefined now if it's divided by 0. Anyhow, so last platform touch attribution, that's what we're on. And as you see here, same deal. Conversion happened on day 3, 20 conversion happened on day 3. Because Google Ads is last Google Ads, it has 20. Facebook Ads is Facebook Ad 1, it get 20 on day 1. So if you're doing the conversion perspective, day 1, day 2 just doesn't count. Like in any conversion perspective, if conversion doesn't happen on the day, it doesn't count. So what you'll see is that on day 3, both platforms, because you spend $3K on both platforms, you are attributed 150 for each of those. Simple. And then let's talk about ad perspective, because that's our attributed back on the time ad delivery. So day 1, Google Ad 1 took no credit because of the nature of the last touch. Only Facebook took credit, and you spend 1,000 on Facebook, so you get 50 CPA there. And Google Ad 2, because it happened on day 2, it's computed onto Google. So you get 100, 2,000 divided by 20, and your CPA is 100 in ad perspective. Day 3, once again, if it's ad perspective, ad was not delivered on day 3, so you get no attribution at all on day 3. Everything else is undefined because it would just be 0. All right, so now let's talk about the next model, which is platform-specific data-driven model. Only one platform uses this, is Google. It's Google's data-driven model. But I just want to, because this has been it's the most effective conversion model or attribution model for Google. So I just want to give you an overview of what it does specifically. So all ads in a single platform still take 1 credit. So each platform, depending on how many platforms you have, your conversion report, if you add them all together, will be 3 or 4 times as much as it actually is. So let's consider a single order case again. As you see here, same deal for Facebook, because it's just one specific ad, so it just took 1 credit. But because there are 2 Google ads, and depending on the experiences of 2 Google ads, the Google Ads 2 have a little bit better experience, so it took 0.6, and Google Ads 1 took 0.4. And in a multi-order case, same distribution here, similar method of computation here, the naive conversion perspective didn't change because it's attributed on the day of conversion, and because it's a naive model, you just do 150 still flat. But for ad perspective, it changed slightly. It didn't change for Facebook on day 1, still 50. But for Google Ads 1 now takes some credit. And so your CPA is actually something for day 1 now, it's 133. And day 2, Google 2 took less credit, so it's 160 now. So as you see, it's overall a more fair distribution of credit, despite the fact that it's still incredibly unfair. All right, now let's talk about last touch model. So this is the actual last touch model or last click model, in contrary to the platform-specific last click model, where only the very last non-direct interaction takes a credit. No one else gets any credit. You can see this or use this in Google Analytics in order perspective. So in single order case, because we don't, as I said, we put direct in trashcan every single day. Google Ads on day 2 took all the credit for the conversion. And in multi-case, same idea, but let's look at the CPA computation. Once again, the naive conversion perspective doesn't change much, but because Facebook no longer takes that credit because it's too early in the conversion funnel is now undefined, and only Google takes the credit. And day one, day two, for day two, it's very similar to platform-specific last touch because Google happened to have that last touch credit, and it will get a CPA of 100. So now let's move on to a slightly more complicated model. It's called linear attribution model. Be aware, this is not linear attribution model as you see in Google Ads. If you see in Google Ads, that's a platform-specific linear model that we did not cover here and it's essentially the same thing as you see here, except Google only evenly attribute credit to their ads and does not count anyone else. And if you have multiple platforms, they will do the same thing for their own platform, so you all adds up to beyond one for your credit, which doesn't make it a valid model. But overall, the concept of linear attribution, I mean, you've been through a lot, is all interaction gets a credit even distributed, besides direct. So you see here, you get 0.2 on each. Oh, on this slide, I even had direct there. It doesn't really matter. We just proceed with this case. Oh, this one doesn't. But anyhow, you see the point that all of the non-direct channels gets their credit distributed evenly. And in terms of CPA computation, because there are 2 Google ads and each got 5, so we're doing the naive conversion perspective CPA. Google gets 10 credit and Facebook gets 5, so it's 300 and 600. Because 5 were given organic search, that's why the overall credit given to the advertising platforms is less, which is very good because you do want to attribute your conversion to an organic channel. They matter, they exist, and you don't want to have everything attributed to a paid channel. And paid channel like you to do that because it gives them more credit, but you don't want to give them the credit when it's not due. And on day one, we're doing the ad perspective, which is back attribution. Google got 5, Facebook got 5, so each have 200. On day 2, Facebook got none because there's literally no Facebook interaction left, and Google gets 5, which results in 400. Overall, this method, as you see, is already giving less credit to paid platform, which is something that we want to do, in all honesty. All right, so now let's talk about my pet attribution model, which is a Humanlytics data-driven model, which is a valid model, and it's based on the synthesis that we had based on all the models we talked about, and based on our experience in attribution, it's our attempt to come up with the most accurate attribution model there is in the market, and let's just dive right into it. The Humanlytics attribution model, credit are distributed across all platforms besides direct, and based on what happened during each of the visit. We also do something different for the CPA computation, which we will see in the next slide when we're computing CPA specifically. But overall, the way we do it is we take the on-site experience, that's all on-site experiences related to a specific order, and we look through what key pages are visited and what are some key metrics for each of those visits, and assign credit to each of those visits accordingly. You can, in theory, do them in Google Analytics as well via a custom attribution model. We just make this process a lot easier. And we can pilot this a lot more flexibly because we use the API, and then we actually have the full hit level data for each of the orders. So what we are able to produce is much better than you will usually see in Google Analytics. So let's talk about CPA computation. Everything here is in order perspective. We don't believe in ad perspective when computing cross-channel CPA for the very reason that it will be by nature inflated if you are using ad perspective-based CPAs. So let's take an example here that on day 1, Google Ad 1 cost $500 out of all the budget that you spend on Google on that day. And on day 1, the Facebook costs $500 as well. So we consider cost at an ad level. We don't consider cost at an aggregate level. And on day 2, $1,000 spent on ad 2, and there's no Facebook, so we don't have to talk about that. So when we're talking about actual CPA computations, the way we do it is, okay, there are 20 conversions happen on day 3. So let's attribute all the credit and compute CPU for day 3. So, but what is it for every separate platforms? For example, for Google, we see that there are 9 credit attributed total to Google. And the total cost of that 9 credit is 500 plus 1,000 because those are the money you spend on getting that conversion specifically. So your Google CPA is 166. And for Facebook, because you spend $500 on Facebook that resulted in the specific conversions we see, and you get 5 credit for it, your overall CPA for Facebook is 100. And the remaining credit goes to organic search, which doesn't have a CPA because it's very hard to track a concrete number of money you spend on organic search. So overall, what you get here is the real conversion perspective CPA, because it takes ad spend that happened previously and attribute it forward into the conversions instead of using the spending you have on the day, because spending you have on the day are not used to make these conversions happen. So yeah, that's overall the way we do it, and we custom it, we can tailor it to our customers and to all of our client based on how you want the site interactions to be. And so this could be completely tailor-made for every single company we work with. So now it's bragging. It's approaching the end of the presentation, and honestly, I'm getting really tired. So let's just talk briefly why I believe the Humanlytics model is better. First, you use cross-channel data-driven model, which is you can't find it anywhere else in the market right now, unfortunately. And we recognize the delayed nature of multi-channel conversions, and that's why we use the real conversion model, real conversion-centric model to compute your CPA. And the way we're doing CPA right now for all companies is a vanity metric. Because day 3, anything you spend on day 3, there's no ad delivered, so you have 0. Like, then if I compute my naive CPA, it will be 0 divided by 30, and that's just plainly pretty dumb in terms of computing CPA. And at the very last, we aggregate and compute on an ad level. What this means is that if an ad is not related to your conversion specifically, we don't want that to be taken into consideration for your CPA. Overall, very sophisticated. Very proud of the team that were able to make it happen. And if you're interested in learning more, about what we do at Humanlytics, feel free to reach out to me. And this is my email. If you have any questions about the Humanlytics product, how we specifically do attribution, or want to try our attribution models for you, reach out to me. But overall, I want this to keep this guy relatively less commercial than what other guys online usually are. Just feel free to ask me any questions about this. Sorry about the later part of the video. It's getting like sloppy, and I'm getting like I'm getting a little bit sleepy because it's being a 2-hour recording session to make this entire video happen. And hope I had everything explained clearly. It's not a very easy topic to talk about attribution modeling, but hope this provides some help to you to break it down and shed you some details about how each numbers are computed you see on a daily basis in terms of number of orders.